Welcome to the Veteran Psychedelic Discourse. We are a group that advocates for safe and responsible exploration of mental health treatments. This is not a platform for the solicitation of illegal substances. So we have a returning guest. Jake is he's a friend of mine, a friend of the show. I met him at the Heroic Hearts Project psilocybin retreat that we had in Portland, Oregon, it was July, and he recently, it was September, went and helped out in Peru for an ayahuasca retreat. So welcome back, Jake. And for the people that didn't happen to see the last episode that we had you on, do you mind giving us a little bit of background on your service?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great to see you guys again, and thanks for inviting me back as well. Yeah, so my background is that I was in the United States Marine Corps from roughly 2000, I think 8 to 2013. Yeah, and I was a combat engineer, so mainly dealt with a lot of explosives and breaching stuff like that. And then so when I deployed, I went to the Helmand Province, Afghanistan, in 2009 to 2010. I deployed essentially to do route clearance. So my job was basically to drive around or patrol around on foot looking for IEDs and clearing routes. So pretty high stress, dangerous job. And unfortunately, 3 IEDs found me before I found them. Um, Luckily, I got all my hands and toes and limbs and everything, but definitely rattled the brain quite a bit. Got a lot of concussions and traumatic brain injuries from that. So that eventually led me to being medically retired. And then, yeah, that's kind of what essentially started my path down this road. I struggled for, I think it was probably about 8 or 9 years before I actually got involved with psychedelics. But I had heard about them from the moment I think I was getting medically retired. I was big into the Joe Rogan podcast back then. So I had heard, the potential that psychedelics have for healing things like trauma and brain injuries and stuff like that. So that sort of sparked the idea in my brain of like, hey, maybe this is an avenue that I could look at for healing. Um, and then yeah, so I got medically retired, and I almost immediately started kind of exploring the psychedelics, but I didn't have any legitimate context for this as far as the healing aspect of it. Um, it was more so like, hey, let me do these, and I guess you could say just the recreational route is the way I took, and it was okay for a while. I had some good experiences and some profound experiences, but it was okay until it wasn't. A lot of these traumas and things started to resurface, and I was like, what is happening? And I didn't know how to deal with them, and I wasn't setting intentions when I was doing this. I was just doing them and putting on movies or hanging out with friends, and maybe going to a concert. And so it eventually started to become pretty bad experiences, and they weren't fun and pleasant and healing. So I took a step back and avoided these things for a long time, until then I got connected with the wonderful organization Heroic Hearts Project. Um, and that led me to go on my first psychedelic healing retreat in 2021 with them. And it was a retreat to Peru to do ayahuasca. And I did five, that time was four, I did four ayahuasca ceremonies. And it was the the biggest catalyst for healing of my entire life. I wouldn't say that it was like a magic pill that healed me, but I use the term catalyst because it set me on a path. It was a course correction for my healing journey that did completely change my life. I mean, yeah, the psychedelics were a major part of it, and they helped illuminate a lot of things. Um, but yeah, having said that, I mean, it's pretty clear that you still have to do the work. You still have to put in the work. Um, yeah, and then so it was such a great healing experience for me my first time. I just became really passionate about it and wanted to do everything I could to give back to the community and other veterans and the Heroic Hearts Project. So I got more and more involved with them, became an ambassador, and then eventually kind of became a liaison. Um, Liaison slash facilitator. It's kind of, they're changing names and terms of it, but essentially like a facilitator. And so then I went on a couple more retreats, and then yeah, so that was again my most recent retreat in September that I got to go on as a facilitator and help um, yeah, help just another group of veterans get that same kind of healing that I got. So it's been a really profound and purposeful journey for me. It's really brought a lot of that sense of like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing now. I'm on the right path, not only for my own healing journey, but also to help others on their healing journey as well.
That's awesome. How often would you say that you're involved with ayahuasca? And if you were to go to help out at a retreat or whatever situation, would you also be taking it? And is that always the case, or like explain? Can you give us a little bit about little bit on that?
Totally. Yeah, right now my involvement isn't I wouldn't say like super active. So for the past couple of years, I've gone on like one retreat to Peru a year. I know for sure, at least for their participants, they like to have a little bit of a gap, at least like kind of 6 months between psychedelic experiences. So I think same thing with their facilitator liaisons, they wouldn't want to send them back to back to back. Um, but yeah, it does happen maybe 2 to 3 times a year for some other people more involved as well. But yeah, and so when I go on these retreats, it does depend on which retreats you do. So I know like in my experience on these Peru retreats, it is kind of customary and it's sort of just a tradition, I guess, that everyone who's in the ceremony space does consume medicine. So usually on those retreats, like I said, it's anywhere between 3 to 5 ceremonies on these Peru retreats. And so it is, like I said, it's usually a tradition everyone drinks, including the facilitators and the shaman and everybody. But usually more likely they would consider it like a working dose. So I'll have a much smaller dose than if I was there as a participant and really trying to do some deep work. So I'm still in the medicine space, but I'm also still able to be fully functional and assist in anything if needed. So and then but so yeah, since on the last retreats I've been on, there's been 5. There has been times where also if I feel like, hey, maybe after the first couple, we've had some good nights. Everyone's kind of getting used to it, and there's no issues arising. I might talk to the other facilitators and be like, hey, maybe tonight, if it's okay with you guys, would I be able to do a larger dose? And they'll be totally fine with that. So I can still have a good therapeutic full dose if I want to. But yeah, it's generally more than likely just like a working dose. So, but also like I know with our Oregon retreat, the facilitators did not consume. So it just kind of depends on which retreat you go on, I think. But yeah, usually I think with the ayahuasca, it's customary that everyone does consume at least a bit.
Going to the retreat, I remember for the psilocybin one, it was just to talk about like pricing as far as barrier to entry for people that are interested in like looking more into this. For the psilocybin, uh, I know it's a sliding scale. The lower tier for entry was like $500. Is that the same for the ayahuasca? Same entry?
It's just a little bit more. So it's 750 is kind of their
Okay.
minimum required donation. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously if you're a little more well off and you can afford to pay more, that's great because it just gives us the opportunity to help other veterans in need. But yeah, that's kind of the minimum accepted donation usually for the bigger retreats because they do cover it covers everything your airfare and the whole retreat stay and all the food and everything like that. So um, yeah, they used to do it a little bit different, but now that they cover the airfare and everything just to make all the logistics and everything a little more smoothly ran, and so they can try to get everybody to arrive there at the same times and leave at the same times.
With the airfare included, then that's pretty good.
Yeah, because I've had to pay for the travels down there, and it's usually for me anyway, coming from North Idaho, it's usually over $1,000 round trips though.
You were saying it was five ceremonies.
Yeah.
Is that over 5 days?
So this one was it's a little bit longer retreat on this particular one I've gone on the past couple of years. So this one technically we were at the retreat for I believe 12 days. So it's five ceremonies throughout a maybe it's 10 to 12 day period. So it's basically every other day you're having a ceremony. But yeah, this retreat in particular is slightly longer than usual because so they're partnering with another organization called Anaya Science, and they're doing research on the ayahuasca and how it affects brain chemistry, the gut microbiome, all this kinds of amazing stuff, and the effects on PTSD. So yeah, this one is a little bit longer, and we have some time on the beginning and the after the retreat, a couple days that we stay in Iquitos to do some more of these research things. But yeah, generally it's a ceremony basically every other night that you're there. I think that's pretty much common no matter which retreat you go on. But most of them, I'd say our average retreats are about 6-ish days and usually 3 ceremonies.
Real quickly, you had brought up the concept of the working dose. Now, I can imagine why they do that, but I'm wondering, did they like explain what the purpose of that is, or is there any like, I don't know, like I'm wondering what their rationale that they're presenting to you guys is. It just drink this, or is there an assistive aspect to what they're trying to accomplish?
It's never been like formally explained to me, but I think I have a pretty good understanding of it. And I think it's just so everyone is in that same medicine space, that same medicine mind space. It also, taking the working dose helps open me up to, it opens up my heart, makes me more compassionate, more just more able to connect with people, maybe if they are struggling or something like that. And yeah, just in being involved in that spirit space, if you will. Sometimes it can get a little, some of the terms can get a little woo-woo, but yeah, there's because I've definitely still had like not full-blown psychedelic experiences, obviously, but I'm still for sure in the medicine space and seeing spirits and getting messages myself. And sometimes helps me be more helps my intuition be a little bit more heightened. So I'm a little more aware of maybe when someone's in need or they're struggling or something like that. And I can kind of tune into that a little bit more. And I've had that same experience for me on the other end when I'm being a participant. I can almost, it's not quite like I forget the name of the word, but we're communicating non-verbally or whatever. But I'll be in need and I won't say anything, but sometimes a facilitator will just they'll know, their intuition will pick up on that and they'll come and give me some assistance. So
That's perfect, because I was curious if you could speak to maybe the differences that you'd had experienced from facilitating with and without. You know what I mean? So I appreciate your input there. That kind of answers some of my questions.
You said 2001 was the first year that you took ayahuasca.
Yep, correct. Yep.
Okay, so I gotta ask, do you have any tip, not maybe not tips, but do you have anything to say for someone that's a veteran? Maybe on our retreat there was some veterans that have never touched any type of psychedelics prior. For a veteran in a similar situation that is considering ayahuasca being a potential avenue to explore, do you have any words of wisdom for someone that's trying to looking at this as an option?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, the biggest things that come up is for sure, number one, it's pretty common that everyone will say, don't have any expectations. Especially once you're committed to the experience and you've decided this is something you want to do, you should probably just kind of stay away from, they say to stay away from like trip reports, don't, because I kind of did the wrong thing. I went down the rabbit hole of like trying to find videos of ayahuasca ceremonies and trying to read up on everybody else's experience. And I think that's pretty common for military people. You want to come in prepared, you want to know what you're getting yourself into. But everybody's experience is so vastly different. And even during a retreat, you can have, like, if there's 3 ceremonies, you can have 3 vastly different ceremonies. Every single night can be completely different. So it really doesn't do any good to try to prepare yourself as far as like knowing what to expect. Just go into it without expectations. Just go into it with a full open heart and the intentions of what you're looking to do, whether that's healing or self-exploration. And yeah, just being open-minded. Because sometimes, like I said, this can be kind of, it's definitely, if you've never done it, it's definitely a new experience and something other than anything like you've probably experienced before. These different levels of consciousness can bring up a lot of things that, kind of like I said before, that some people it maybe sounds kind of woo-woo until you've experienced it. And you're like, oh, I had no idea that this was a thing. I didn't know this was possible to, have communication with the medicine or communication with spirits or ancestors. And so that can kind of, if you never had that experience, hearing these things can kind of be like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. He's pretty out there. But just go into it with open mind. Don't have any expectations, but yeah, just be open to all the possibilities and everything that can arise. So yeah, I think that would probably be my 2 biggest pieces of advice.
You brought up the term woo, which I know I like grew up in a waspy right-wing conservative home where like meditation was witchcraft. So like I totally feel you there. But like, yeah, just through these experiences that I've done, it's like you have this dissolution or the dissolving of your belief systems in a way where it's like you're forced to look at the woo and be like, huh, like, why does that make more sense than this?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I've seen a lot of people as well that are like very deeply religious. And it doesn't make them any less. If anything, it makes them have a better connection with their religion. But yeah, maybe you're having, just like I said, maybe you're having more awareness of some other things that you weren't aware that were possible. So yeah, just being open-minded to it. But yeah, it's can definitely be a new thing that you didn't know was possible. So
I wanted to ask you, Brian, when Jake's talking about that connection with like ancestors and like kind of like how we were talking about a little bit prior to jumping on the event today, of like makes me think of like channeling in a sense where you're kind of receiving a wisdom, like you're kind of tuned into the right frequency to pull something in.
Yeah.
What does anything come to mind when you hear that from
This,
Jake?
I mean, just from our previous conversations, we've been discussing the brain as a transducer, the idea that it's like basically taking information and repurposing it into a new form of energy. And so like when you use these substances, I think what you're doing is you're putting your brain into a state of stimulation where it's able to access things that would otherwise not be consciously available to you. But that all kind of just is an outgrowth of like the brain as a transducer to convert information from like one form to another. But that's kind of what I was asking about, the medicine being like an amplifier for the trip, especially when you're working with other people. Because I think about that. If I were to facilitate somebody like stone cold sober and trying to like stay with them, that could be an impediment all into itself. You know what I mean? But by having your belief systems kind of reduced a little bit less rigidity in how you see the world, it allows you to have the flexibility to respond to the person in the moment, not trying to dig through the past to figure out what you did back then that you should be doing now, which is probably the wrong thing. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it kind of adds to the point of the possibility of having like a facilitator or somebody like being also taking at least a small amount of the medicine to be some on a similar frequency. I get the whole legality of just how things are being ran here where we live, and the whole worry behind that, but I still see the validity behind it, but I'll digress. I'm curious, you yourself, what's the trajectory for you? Is like facilitation going to be, is that the path that you're going to be taking moving forward, or is this a side quest, if you will, towards something else?
Yeah, no, I think this for me, this is the path that I see myself going down. It's not like a clear defined path, obviously, so I can't tell you exactly what that looks like, but it's definitely something that I feel a deep calling and a deep purpose to continue doing. As for now, as far as the future goes, it does seem like I'm going to continue to be a facilitator with Heroic Hearts, liaison facilitator. I've also recently applied to potentially become an integration coach. They have facilitators which go on the retreats and are, liaison facilitator. They'll help out with the ceremonies and things like that. But then they also have their personal one-on-one integration coaches, and those people are usually a little bit more trained as far as coaching goes and how to assist these experiences along. And so I'm hoping to get more involved on that side of it as well. But yeah, it's just an unknown path for me right now. So it's cool because it challenges me to kind of stay open to that and not be so rigid in my thinking of like, this is what I need to do, because sometimes I can fall into those old pathways. But it's a fun challenge for me to just remain open and put my intentions out there into the world and just kind of be open to receiving what comes. And if it's right for me, it'll come, and if not, then it won't. But yeah, as far as for what I'm hoping for and what I see, it's to continue, at least in some regards, to helping other veterans in the psychedelic realm, just because it's been so impactful for me that I want to continue to give back.
The beginning of the show, we were kind of having a conversation, and maybe this is a good way to segue into it. I feel like we were talking about ibogaine, and they were saying how it was something that was available to like special forces operators to be able to go down, and that kind of segued us into childhood trauma and how that's really like kind of the core of a lot of where this comes from. And so kind of what I wanted to do was just slow down a little bit. Like for veterans out there that are watching this, I think there's a lot of expectation that your experiences in combat or, during your deployment, they have to be like, legendary, or they have to like be something that's worth putting on a TV screen or something. And what we're talking about is the idea that when you're a kid, you're conditioned or programmed in order to respond to stressors. And this is where you don't pick up your trauma necessarily, but where you learn how to respond to your trauma that you're going to pick up in the future. And so that's kind of one of the things that I want to point out with the psychedelic work that maybe you're doing. For me personally, this is a great way to like break up my rigid belief system that I'd been handed by my parents, and maybe look for ways that I could interact with the world that would make me more happy, and
Yeah.
being kinder and more nice to people, a stronger sense of unity in myself. So the point of that was just to maybe slow down a little bit if you're interested in this, or this is something that's new to you. Like it's the discovery of your authentic self, and you didn't lose your authentic self in Iraq or Afghanistan. It probably happened a whole lot earlier. So yeah, just to kind of reframe some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought it up because it's such an important aspect of this work. And it's something we we encourage everyone that goes through this program, is that you may be here because you've been through some traumatic events in the military, but almost all the time it does go all the way back to a childhood thing. It just exactly like you said, our nervous systems are rewired before we're even 3 years old, and that's how we learn to adapt to different stressors and yeah, how to learn how to be comfortable and feel safe or not safe. And so that kind of goes into the whole polyvagal theory and stuff like that. I'm not sure if you guys have brought that up, and I've done only a minimal amount of work on that, so I probably wouldn't be the best one to speak about that. But essentially, nervous system regulation. That's how we learn to regulate our nervous system, is before usually the age of 3.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we don't even most of the time have a lot of memory of those periods in our life. So it can be kind of challenging to go back. And for me, in my instance, I thought, I had a pretty awesome childhood. I didn't have like I wasn't physically abused or anything like that. Both my parents are still married. I was like, yeah, I had a pretty awesome childhood. But after doing this work, it's become aware to me like, oh, I see. I may not have had like a classic abusive childhood or anything, or traumatic childhood, but there was some things that I remember that that kind of shaped the way that I handle and that trauma is expressed in my life, that do definitely stem from my childhood. And it's been very helpful in me to learn how to move forward and get past some of these other traumatic events that I've gone through, is by learning about how my system is wired from when I was a child. So yeah, it's a very important aspect to be aware of.
Yeah, yeah, we've done a little bit on the body keeps the score with Bessel van der Kolk, but that you raise a good point there with the central nervous system. Not only is it conditioned by the time it's 3 years old, by the time you're an adult, your central nervous system can't tell the difference between your imagination and real life. So if you're like wound up in all these hyper anxious imaginary scenarios, like from you picked up in Iraq that aren't here now, or from Afghanistan, they're not happening now, your central nervous system might as well still be there. That's why you feel like you're there, because it can't tell the difference.
100%. And that was in a lot of ways my experience, because like I said, being a combat engineer and having to do route clearance, my everyday life going out was like level 9 or 10 of heightened awareness, of like looking on the ground hyper vigilantly, looking at cues around the environment and everything, because I'm looking for bombs that are buried, and they're very disguised very well, so I can't find them. So it's very much a very high stress job, and that's how I was wired. And it did kind of changed my perception and the lens that I saw the world. So I was seeing everything as a threat, as a potential enemy, essentially. And so that was the lenses that I was viewing the world. And it was very, very difficult. It made life a lot harder than it needed to be, and very unenjoyable to say the least. So yeah, learning to kind of reset my nervous system was a huge part of my healing journey, and actually learn to regulate it and come back to a baseline where I'm calm, and I'm content and feeling safe in my own body and my nervous system and my perceptions of the world and the people around me. So yeah, that was huge for me.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned like safe in your own body. Just the idea of even taking time just to sense your whole body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just these little things that seem woo woo, and you're like, well, if you slow down and try it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You want to stay in the facilitation field. We were talking beforehand about Olympia decriminalizing psychedelics. Do you plan on like, because I mean, you're kind of in like that tri-state area to be able to be available for Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, assuming
Mhm.
Idaho ever makes a move in this direction.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I would love to stay and as involved as I can. We recently did have a kind of a facilitators talk at Heroic Arts, and I brought that up saying that, even though I'm in Idaho, I'm not a far drive from Portland. So I would love to, if there's the opportunity to be able to help out in other states, do that as well. I think for the current moment, they're trying to get as many people who are residents of Portland or just of Oregon in general to fill those roles, just because they're trying to build that community first.
Yeah.
And they would love it if everyone was able to stay connected even after these experiences and these ceremonies, so it can kind of foster a more supportive group network. But yeah, as it continues to grow Heroic Hearts and we continue to do more and more retreats, it may be something that is required to have more facilitators. So that might be something that I will be doing more of, is out of state stuff for sure. As far as the domestic retreats go. Yeah.
How is Heroic Hearts advertising these retreats or their services just in general?
So they mainly, from what I've experienced, has been social media outreach. They do also do, there's different fundraisers and stuff. I know there's like a big event going on in California coming up, I think in like a week or two.
It's like a movie premiere or something.
So they do have that as well. I think that one, is that one in
I
California?
think that already happened, actually. My bad.
It might have, but yeah, but they have had a previous documentary in the past, and they've been doing a kind of a movie preview tour with that. They do other fundraising events, like that's the one that's coming up in California. It's their gala event or something. But yeah, it's mainly a lot of social media outreach. They've done some petitioning and stuff for the legalization of psychedelics. I know Jesse and a big group from Heroic Hearts went to the Capitol when they were discussing making MDMA assisted therapy illegal. And even though that didn't get passed this time, but they're still very active in that realm. But yeah, I think a lot of the participants usually find out either from word of mouth or from social media or from just searching it out themselves. That's kind of how I found out about it, I think, is searching it out. It is, I mean, I do think that this work would be helpful for a lot of veterans, but it is also something that I think is kind of important that they're finding out on their own path. It's not something that I think is the best for like if you have someone who's not interested in psychedelics and they're very much like grew up how I did in that DARE era, and they're like, oh, those are not good things. If you were to maybe push this on them at the wrong time, it might not be the most beneficial medicine for them at the time. So it's kind of one of those things that people have to sort of not have to, but it's best when they kind of search it out on their own in a ways, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like, I mean, maybe a vet taking advantage of the opportunity that it's available, but really not having like a heart for change, like
Totally.
I remember when I started this journey, like I was like so desperate for change. Like,
yeah,
Alex and I were like taking a day off a week from work. Like it was just like, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. So yeah, you have to want it so bad. You're willing to look for something new.
Yeah. And that's generally the prime candidate for this type of work, for it to be able to work the best, is someone who's gone through the gambit of all the other traditional therapies first, and it failed to work out for them. They've tried the medication route, they've tried the talk therapy route, and all those things, and they've kind of reached the end of the road, because that's exactly where I was too. I was like, I've tried everything and nothing seems to be working. So yeah, I'd be willing to look into this as well. And I found that, and luckily this one did work for me. So
I wonder if that might not be a smart approach for a campaign. Like, because Alex and I have been talking about this, about what Heroic Hearts could do in order to spread their reach. But obviously, you're not looking to pick people up at like, late night infomercials, that are, you know what I mean? So you want people that are really ready to do the work. But that's a really great way to preface it, that if you've tried these traditional therapies, if you've done this talk therapy, if you've done the EMDR, you've done the stellate ganglions, if you've done all this stuff and it hasn't worked for you, because I feel like that's a lot of guys who've been put through the VA. The VA will run you through modality after modality, regardless if you're getting anywhere. So yeah, that might be something to consider, just approaching it directly. Tried the others, try something new.
Yeah. I think they do a certain amount of that for sure, but it's definitely a good, just a good thing to kind of continue to communicate and push that through. But yeah, I know, because even at the VA, there's certain VAs that are sort of getting into the ketamine therapy and stuff like that. But that usually is one of the requirements, is that I think one of the requirements is that you've tried 3 or more medications or something like that. So there is kind of
it's 3 or more medications, and you can't be using cannabis. They'll drug test you if you want to get into that program. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of similar with the VA as well. So yeah.
Are you in touch very much with the veteran community in your local area? I'm curious as far as like what's the temperature reading on veterans and the idea of psychedelic therapies out in Idaho.
Yeah, I would like to be more involved. I would say the veteran community in Idaho generally consists a little bit more of like your older generation veterans, as far as like going to like VFWs and stuff like that. And not to say those people aren't good candidates, but generally not exactly the people looking for this type of work. But yeah, there is, at least I know for sure, one other veteran who's gone through the Heroic Hearts Project who does live in my home city. And yeah, I think another good community that I'm involved with, and there's a lot of vets kind of more my age, my generation, is through the jiu-jitsu gym. I meet a lot of guys through there, and generally those guys are kind of more along the path of like self-improvement and just doing the work to be the best version of yourself. And so I've connected with a lot of veterans that are interested in the psychedelic realm through that world as well. So
I feel like this might just be me, but the veterans that are going to the VFWs, that older generation, I mean, I get that they're not really primed to pursue something like this, but I would be willing to argue that they might be a great group to get involved in it. And
yeah,
I'm curious what would be the best way to, and there's so many of them as well. I mean,
yeah.
if Faro Carts is ever like needing to fill seats for a retreat, I wouldn't be surprised if there'd be just walk into a VFW and ask if anyone has trauma though.
Yeah.
Just to start off the conversation with that and see how
Yeah.
things go. But so yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious. Go
I
ahead.
agree. And I wish that, I think a good step for them would be to try to find some of that generation guys that, because I know there has been a few that have gone through the program already. It would be great to bring those guys back in to be maybe a coach or facilitator for another group of those. Because I know when we had our Oregon trip, initially, I'm not sure if you remember, we were supposed to have an older gentleman join us on our trip. And I think he attended even the first group call. And he was, I'm pretty sure he was a Vietnam veteran. And you could kind of just see his vibe. And the first one was kind of like, yeah, I don't know about this kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm in the right place. And he ended
I
up,
forgot about that guy.
yeah, he ended up dropping out of the program. But I was so excited to see him go through the program and see the transformation he got, because I think he had just lost his wife and everything. And it was, yeah,
You're
I,
right.
I
Well,
hope he's doing well. And I hope that maybe he can circle back around and be ready for a retreat eventually. But yeah, that's a great community and a great, uh, generation that I think would benefit greatly from this type of work for sure.
well,
Mm.
real quickly, like all you need is one. You know
Yep.
what I mean? I mean, granted, that one didn't work, and it sounds like there was some ulterior problems there. But like, all you need is one person to leave, go have the experience, and then come back. So even if you're just catching one fish at a time, it's still definitely worth it. So I mean, that to me, like just the VFWs, man. If you just had a group of people that were willing to walk around and just see if anybody was willing to bite, because man, that one person's gonna go back to that VFW, and he's gonna be different, and he's gonna be talking about it. And it's like, this is how organic movements start.
I think
Absolutely.
I think that's the trick, is getting the wheels turning, is like get the initial person in, have them
Mm-hmm.
return, because I think after that, then there's gonna the idea is gonna spread. It's just to catch the first couple, to just let them have that experience. I'm not sure would be the most effective way to go through that though. That'd be quite a long discussion to try to mull over. But yeah, no, it's interesting. In our chat, our guest says that vet suicides, a lot of them are over 60 years old, and that's not something I even really think about, of going through all that time, and then
Yeah.
at that age, that's
Well,
rough.
think about everything that they've seen too. I mean, obviously, when
Yeah,
they were like in their heyday, they were growing up watching, This Is Your Brain on Drugs and stuff like that. But these veterans, they've seen psychedelics make their way into the VA. So, like in their mind, something's got to be clicking. If you're in the VA and you're trying to get treatment, you're going to be made aware of the fact that there's like a PTSD clinic, and that PTSD clinic has a whole list, a range of like maybe not necessarily evidence-based treatments that are available for you to do through the VA. So it's like they'll begin to see that there's more options. So maybe what you're talking about is a mentality that might be 10 years old, and maybe these people might be ready for the opportunity. I wonder, especially with that suicide, because that's a hard way to end, man. 60 years of rough living and
Yeah. And
closing out like that.
That's the biggest thing that stands out to me with that community and that generation is that those guys they've more than likely have tried everything by this point. There's not a lot of things under the sun that they probably haven't experienced as far as trying to deal with their traumas and things like that. So most of that community and that generation is probably ready and looking for something like this that could potentially be a very effective remedy for them.
Interesting. This is a great conversation because, like I said, me and Alex have been brainstorming over this, trying to figure out, like where's the low hanging fruit? Where's like the people we're not reaching out to? Because like they're there, it's like, I mean, all you have to do is go on social media and you can see there's like a swell. This is a whole community of people out there that are interested in this. So
yeah. And in my case, I think just being the advocate, being the change yourself has been the biggest thing. Because I will, I've posted some things about psychedelics or just even my retreats I've been on, some pictures and videos and stuff like that. And I've got a lot of people who have just direct messaged me and been like, hey man, like, how do I get involved with this? This seems like it's been so beneficial for you. So yeah, in my case, a lot of time it's just kind of being the example. And even in my own family, that's been the case. Because I recently, my mom recently, she just went down to Intertrek this past weekend and had her first psilocybin ceremony. And it was a challenging one for her, but I'm just proud of her for even going through that experience. And that probably would have never been even a thought for her if she didn't see me go through my experience and just be able to see the transformation and be like, holy cow, there is something to this, because you're a different person than you were before you went through this. And so yeah, she I think she initially was really excited to go to do an ayahuasca retreat, but I think this was a good stepping stone for her to get into this field of therapies. And it was incredible for her. And I'm so thankful that she's gotten to do that, because she had a pretty traumatic childhood as well. So yeah.
You brought something up there about how these are the people who probably tried everything, and it just kind of occurred to me that they've probably been scammed a lot too. A lifetime of people trying to take advantage of them, and it seems like the first hurdle that you're going to have to get over is this is too good to be true. Because like I remember when I started meditating, I read like the gateway analysis and assessment of the gateway experience, and I was like sitting there and I'm like, if 10% of this is true, like my life should be totally different, So like that was a huge barrier I had to get over. It was like, how is this not a bundle of bullshit? Because if it were true, I would know about it.
Totally. Yeah. And I completely agree, because going through the VA myself, I've gotten a lot of devices and stuff that they've prescribed or given to me. Like there's I think it's called like an alpha stim machine. You can kind of clip it in your ears, and it's supposed to be like good for stimulating alpha waves in your brain. And they advertise it as being this super therapeutic thing for PTSD. And I'm not at all saying it is not, but I think the way that it's kind of advertised is like, oh, this is going to be the thing that helps you, that it's going to change. And they're beneficial, but they're little tools that I've added to my tool belt. But there's nothing quite like doing this type of work that's been that big change for me. This type of thing, like I said, was the biggest catalyst that put me on the right path of my healing journey. Whereas these other things are helpful tools that will assist with symptoms and stuff. They can kind of help minimize symptoms and bring me back to maybe a more regulated state. But something like this is doing the work on the core issues. I think a lot of the things that are given from the VA, which again, not saying they're bad, but a lot of it, just like medications, is to sort of attack the symptoms. And so that can be helpful, but yeah, this is doing the root core work is where the psychedelics are really shine in. So
it really does come down to efficacy. I was reading a paper a while ago, and they were explaining that classic psychedelics like lysergic and psilocybin, there's a gene that we have, the TRKB gene, which is like kind of an antidepressants gene, and it has a positive effect on it that's like 1,000-fold stronger than an SSRI. So it's like we're talking about like you're farming a field with 1 acre, and tomorrow you're farming 1,000 acres. Like that's how much more effective we are. It's like it's light years, man. You're going from the Stone Age into like post-industrial IT world. So yeah, it's totally. Just it's the effectiveness of the tools is it almost seems like magic, like because it's so effective. In some ways, totally. It seems kind of magical.
Yeah. And I just recently had a post that kind of got the most traction. I got the most responses and direct messages, and it was something that I just reposted from I'm gonna forget the name of the news article that posted it, but it was essentially that one psilocybin experience is kind of showing to be more effective than medication alone. And so things like that. And then also like on these retreats that I've been on the past couple of years with Anaya Science, they're also doing a lot of very, very good work in that realm of showing the results. I think they just recently released their preliminary results because it's supposed to be, their whole study is like a 5-year study, I think. But their preliminary data was incredible from what they've seen. I think I want to say, I'll butcher the numbers, but a huge number of veterans that go through this program and do the research basically don't fit the qualifications for PTSD anymore. And not only that, but their brain scans are better. They're performing better on cognitive tasks and memory tasks and color matching tasks. And I think even there's a lot of gut microbiome changes they're saying that are helping gut flora and things like that improve, which is, and also a huge aspect to the healing journey because your gut, I think there's more serotonin produced in your gut.
Serotonin, yeah, yep.
So your gut and brain have a huge connection between all this kind of stuff. And even epigenetics, they do epigenetic studies and they're able to see some pretty powerful changes in that. So we're talking about dealing with these family lineage traumas that have maybe been passed down from generation to generation, things that were completely out of our control. So yeah, very, very
Yeah.
good stuff.
It's funny, the side effects are also positive, not unlike what you see from a lot of the stuff we get prescribed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's usually a bonus that a lot of the side effects are pretty positive. You have a glowing after effect usually after doing this kind of work. Not to say that it's always it can be difficult at times, but even on the difficult times, I see people coming out on the other end and just new people. They're so grateful they got this experience and were able to do that work. So sometimes that's what it takes is going through that crud to come out shining on the other side.
Yeah, it's worth it, and it's so acute too, that tough time. It's like it's not like I don't know. I used to see people prescribe stuff, and it's like a prolonged suffering.
Absolutely.
Just the way that they're going through life, and I mean, like you already said, you could have a rough experience going through some of the experiences of these medicines. Though it's almost like kind of like it's like you're earning this level of wisdom very quickly. It's like you're going through the experience almost maybe again in a sense, kind of like going through like the shit. I'm gonna. I watched a lot of X-Men when I was a kid. It's like going through the danger room. It's like going through the danger room, and it's like you feel like you're dying. You feel like you could die right here, but at the end of the day, it's all just happening with inside you. And but damn it, on the back end of it, the benefits that you could reap, just your relationships to substances or people, your own life. I could only speak for myself really, but just the curiosity and enthusiasm I had for just being alive again on the back end was just like, oh, I didn't realize that this was an option to have again. And so, yeah, no, it's beneficial.
Yeah. And that's why I'd love to be a part of this work is to see that because seeing that makes everything worth it. I feel so privileged to be able to go on these retreats and see the afterglow that people have and the transformations that they've had and the realizations they've gotten. It's just it's so powerful and so humbling every single time. And yeah, I mean, it can be intimidating and you can have some difficult experiences, but chances are you've already been having a lot of difficult experiences. You've already been struggling as it is. So to go through one more tough experience to be able to kind of come out on the other side, I think is, like you said, completely worth it.
Well, and just to reframe that too, like we're talking about suffering and we're talking about all this stuff, but really, like from my perspective, it's just discomfort. It's a really terrible relationship with being uncomfortable. And so because we hate it so much, we suffer as a result of it. And it's like that's one of the things I dig about psychedelics is you can like take them, you have like so the body sensations kicking in, go and meditate and just feel it all. You know what I mean? Like allow yourself just to be uncomfortable and then continue to explore. It's like this is where like the real art of resilience comes from, is understanding that it's okay to be uncomfortable. You're getting better.
Absolutely. That reminds me of my favorite book I've read in the past few years. It's actually called The Comfort Crisis. And it dives deep into that about just how, and that's I think a lot of the thing that people look for is kind of going the easy route. You know, that's I think why medications are so popular is because a lot of times it seems like the easiest option and the most comfortable option. You know, how can I get these how can I numb these experiences or these feelings or these emotions and how can I stop feeling them when in reality the thing you really need is to actually feel them fully. You need to
Yeah.
process them and work through them to be able to get these things to sort of release and to be able to move through them and get them unstuck from your body.
And I think what people fail to understand is those are an extension of yourself. If you don't explore those things, then you're not going to know yourself. You're not going to be living a life that you've examined. And all the Greeks told us that that's not a life worth living. Like,
Absolutely.
you got to find the highs and the lows, brother. That's where it's at.
Absolutely. And you can't, I've recently heard something, I think it was from one of the facilitators that brought it up, but I think it's also been spoken by someone, one of the greats like Alan Watts or something like that. But it was like, you can't fully love yourself without loving all of the experiences that you've gone through. And if you tried to go back and change, like if you wanted to change the past and be like, oh, I wish I didn't experience that, you wouldn't be at all the same person you are today. So in order to fully love yourself and who you are today and the person you are, you have to love all the experiences that shaped you to become this person as it is.
I so often after having an experience of catharsis, I find myself saying, shit, I guess it had to happen like that. You know what I mean? It's like, just
Yeah.
it is what it is, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Getting back to the heroic hearts uh, events that you've gone to, I'm curious as far as the number of facilitators compared to maybe the veterans that are there first time that are there for treatment. Is, you know, one-on-one or and then the difference between in Peru and in Oregon, if that was much different. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just the logistics on that, what
Yeah.
your experience has been.
Yeah, absolutely. So my experience in Peru has been with the facilitators numbers being, I wouldn't say one-on-one, but there's usually like one facilitator for every two, maybe three participants. So there's quite a bit of help that's there, quite a bit of experience that's in that room. And that's kind of not even counting usually like the shaman, whoever's leading the the ceremony rather by itself. So I've never experienced any feeling of like not having enough help there. It's always seemed like it's an overwhelming amount of help that's been there. And I think even when we did our Oregon trip, I think it might have been more like a 1-to-1 ratio. We had, I think there were 6
It
facilities
was
and
it
6
was
were,
1-to-1, and then
yeah.
we also had someone in that front office room that was prepping stuff based on like the schedule for tea and different stuff. It was 1-to-1, and then we had someone in the back like in the kitchen prepping stuff as well. So yeah, it was great, to be honest. If anyone's ever considering going to Horo Cards Retreat, if you're an Oregonian, it's easy. You could travel to the Portland area. Even if you've been able to experience some of this stuff on your own time, underground, whatever your situation you have going on, I gotta recommend this at least once in your life, because it was aces across the board. Just the execution and the clinic, the people, the facilitators, everything was aces across the board, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just to touch on the second part of that, the comparison of Peru versus Oregon. The Peru retreats are definitely, it's a more in-depth experience because obviously you got to fly to a different country. You're usually in a spot in a retreat center that's kind of farther out. It's in the jungle. There's usually no service, no Wi-Fi or anything like that. You're eating a local clean diet and everything like that. So it's a little bit more in-depth. And also on the trips I've been to Peru, they also have a few other plant medicine remedies that you can be able to do. Like we'll do a purgative, so it kind of helps cleanse your system, and then there's like some other sinus cleanses that we'll do, and just a lot of other natural drug or natural jungle remedies that they have available. So on that aspect, it's a little more in depth. Also, it's usually a little bit longer of a time, usually at least 6 days. Sometimes on those ones that I did up to like 12 days. And maybe a few more ceremonies as well, versus the Oregon one. Especially if you're a resident of Oregon, it could be very close to you, very easy to get to. Usually a little bit shorter retreat. Yeah, still kind of the same thing with the medicine as far as the healing you're getting. I haven't noticed a tremendous difference in the medicine. I mean, there are some notable differences. There's not as many purging aspects to psilocybin generally. So for better, for worse, just different. I wouldn't say anything better or worse, but yeah, I think less ceremonies. I think we only did 2 ceremonies for the Oregon retreat. So just a little bit shorter. Sometimes that's a little bit easier for people to kind of grasp and wrap their heads around instead of, going out in the middle of the jungle on a boat ride and being kind of that far disconnected from everything can be a little bit more intimidating for some people. So I think it's a little bit easier of a bridge to cross, I think, for people going to the Oregon trip. But I definitely think the opportunity for healing is pretty similar, to be honest. So I think that's a really good aspect of it.
Great, thanks a lot.
Yeah, totally.
I was a little curious if, with some of the stuff that the veterans have gone through, compared to someone who just led a normal life in maybe a dysfunctional household, if there was a lot of people expressing severe, just getting this stuff out of their system, where you wouldn't have to hold them down, but just, I mean, I've been in some ceremonies in Peru where it was just some kid who had gotten strung out on medications, and he was like, God, they spent a heck of a lot of time dealing with him. Um, and the rest of us were kind of just holding space while they got through this thing. Was And I could see veterans not wanting to like hog the microphone or whatever, just I guess you've seen both of that.
So for me personally, I actually haven't done any like retreats or really any ceremonies with, I guess you would say, like a public setting where it's been non-veterans. Fortunately for me, all the retreats I've been on have been in veteran group settings. So I can only speak on that aspect, but I think you were correct on a lot of it. I think one of the more powerful things about the group aspect with the veterans is that generally veterans, they've already been through a lot of tough times. Even just going through boot camp alone, no matter what branch, is a very tough thing that takes a lot of dedication. And then to dedicate 4 years of your life to service to people. I think these people, these veteran groups are just very, very dedicated and have a lot of just integrity going into this. And so, it's funny because every retreat I've been on, everybody else, they want to help everybody. Like, it's really hard when you hear someone really going through it in a ceremony to not want to help them. And that's one of the things that we encourage is like, I know this is going to come up and you're going to want to go help that person, but there's tons of facilitators here. But I think it just goes to show how all the veterans are essentially live such a life of service. Even just joining the military is a life of service. But then when we're having these healing experiences, there's so much willingness and openness to try to be there for everyone, to try to support your friends and your fellow service members in this aspect. Especially if you've had some combat experiences, it's very similar of taking care of the guy next to you. It's exactly like that. So I think that's one of the more beautiful things about these veteran retreats is that comes out even more, is you just want to keep watching your brother's back and keep taking care of each other the same way.
Great, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Guy, I got a question for you. With these guys that are committing suicide over 60, and I know that this is just your subjective opinion on it, but I'm just wondering, like, what do you think like their unconscious desires or conscious desires are that aren't being met, that are leaving them in that place where like that's the option?
Not being a psychologist or a counselor, it's hard to say. I think it's just maybe desperation, and maybe they've just kind of run out. Maybe they think no one's listening. I I just got that fact out of something from the VA, and there's a publication on suicides, and they break it down to, all the different races, male, female, ages, and it was just um, uh, our local group is interested in, eliminating that 22 a day, or
Yeah.
reducing it. Even one a day is too much. So it's I don't feel qualified to say, but I guess maybe anyone who commits suicide, I think they've just kind of given up on themselves. Um, I don't know if that's the answer. And I
It's
think,
so funny because I think a lot of times that's the way we go. A guy like Camus would say that it's them giving up on the world. It's their way of rejecting the world. So I don't know. I was just wondering about that because like I've always been a little bit wary of the VFWs. I tried getting plugged into them when I got back from Iraq, and I found that the Vietnam vets weren't like very accepting. But then when you heard about what happened to the Vietnam vets after World War II, you're like, oh shit, they're just doing what happened to them. And so I'm wondering if, like, 'cause I hear this and I'm like, I'm wondering what kind of community these people have, what kind of acceptance they have. Like, do they have families that they can talk to, or are they like at the end of like beating the shit out of everyone in their life so nobody will pick up the phone anymore? Just trying to get my head wrapped around kind of where these guys were at. Cause I mean, I'm only 40, man. That's 20 more years of lived experience that I don't have. I'm not there yet, but if these are people we want to help, I mean, trying to figure out what they're unconsciously trying to satisfy would be a huge step forward in trying to work with them and communicate with them in a way that you're not just like greasily trying to get them to buy a product off of you, you know?
yeah,
So, yeah.
I think the stigma with psychedelics is so concrete. It's going to take at least 10 more years before. And that's what I was saying with the decrim here. It happened. I don't think that many people heard about it. I don't think that many people in our city even know that it happened. And so it was done in a stealthy manner, which is kind of good. If it hasn't been decrimmed, you're kind of like keeping a lid on things. And then when it happens, it's like, okay, well, where do we go from here? We're trying to figure that out. It's only been a couple of months, but it's still. I've approached the American Legion, and I've walked into the VFW, and there was a big sign on the door: "Do not bring any cannabis products in here." So they are really, you know, I mean, even CBD. So I think that's,
Mm,
I don't know if one thing leads to another, but they're pretty
sure.
strack about that.
Yeah, well, I think to myself, as far as like, I mean, we've had this conversation a few times, Brian, is like, what's the reason why you walked into the recruiter's office in the first place? And to be honest, with just again on the another topic we were talking about of like our upbringing and like trauma and stuff like that. My early years was very confusing because I didn't quite know who I was supposed to be. My parents divorced when I was very young, and so I had these different households with different cultures, and I was finding myself trying to chameleon my way through life so that I could get punished less. But at the end of the day, when I was becoming a young adult, I was getting out of high school, I still had no idea what I don't. Even now, I'm still discovering what preferences I have as far as like my taste in art. I don't really have stuff figured out in that way. And so I feel like when a lot of people going into the recruiter's office are trying to find a way to be a sense of identity, something that's validating about who they are as a person, that they could see the value in themselves in this confusing world with a bunch of crazy stuff going on, something that gives them skills and a community, and they go through boot camp and they get sent on deployment, whether it's Afghanistan or Vietnam, and they have these traumas that take place, and they have these strong bonds, these trauma bonds with their fellows. Some of them survived with them, some of them did not, and then some of them, after even getting out, they take their own lives, and they go through all these. It would be, I don't know how to. I see people now. I ran into a veteran I went to a local bar and grill at this where I live, and this veteran came in with camis, an old guy with the jacket, and he had a hat and he had a sign, and there happened to be a couple other Marines in the bar at the time, and he was having everyone sign his little placard thing. And before taking off, he was like, he said something along the lines of like, Marines don't die, we just regroup at another location or something like that. And I was like, oh, like, he has been this way for 40 years, this guy, without a doubt. And so it's when it's such a concrete part of their identity, and it's the primary variable in their identity, I feel like there's just a lot of kind of just automatic ways to view things based on the culture that has kind of just been embedded with your experience. So I imagine just, maybe for a lot of guys, drug, like we were talking about earlier, just this is your brain on drugs. Drugs are bad. Okay, so stay away, and because if to go back on that is to compromise just a lot of what they held to be true, and a lot they associate with the identity with like the connection with their friends. And so I we still have yet to figure out the right formula to present something like this to get people to just consider it. I don't know what the right formula is, but
You mean people aren't lining up to kill their egos?
no, I you know what, I'm not seeing that. They claim not that that's even the thing that maybe for the briefest of moments, maybe, but yeah, it's not even something that stays that way. But it's
that's like the whole dying and rising concept, is like this old way of thinking dies, a new one rises out of it. You know what I mean? But that can be very confronting when you've had like this one way of looking at the world for 60 years, and holy shit, I lived and so many people have died along the way. Why would I change anything? It's like, this is tried and true, man.
The concrete only sets more and more the longer you go into a certain way of thinking, regardless of what you associate your identity with being. But
that's a good way to look at it. Beliefs like going through a curing process.
And especially in the Marine Corps too, because that's like one of the things they ingrain in you, almost like you said, like a religion, religiously, that once a Marine, always a Marine. You're not a former Marine, you're still a Marine. So even when you see retired people, they say, yeah, I'm a Marine. So yeah, it's definitely a tough, and it's been one of the toughest things I think for me to break from, is that identity of holding on to that I was a Marine, I had all this purpose, I had this job, this dedication, and yeah, just learning.
It wasn't an accident, guys. Like, this is the byproduct of like, basically after World War II, we ramped up our conditioning of our soldiers. That's where we got like the kill mentality. And so like anybody who went through boot camp, like in a post-Korea environment, like you got a whole different experience where like psychologically you were stripped down and you were built back up as a Marine,
And it works for what it's useful for. But yeah, I often wish there was like a boot camp to reintegrate back into society after you're done, because they don't have a lot for that. I think if I don't know how to do it and how to get something like that passed, but I think that would be something that would be very, very necessary, is to have essentially like a boot camp of when you're done to reintegrate back into society and be back to a normal person.
Oh, most definitely that.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think it's necessarily that challenging, though. I think you just need to be able to like fluidly work with people to deprogram them, help them spot the contradictory actions, the inconsistencies in their life that are being used to manipulate them to create, to continue this perceived stability. You know what I mean? But like when you just got to like take time to work with them, and like, where'd you learn that, huh? Where'd you pick that one up? Where'd you get that idea? And this is like how you deprogram people.
Yeah. Just helping them to not fall into the same traps that we've all fallen into when we're getting out of holding on to that identity and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like there's lots of work to do.
Yeah. Get a good pair of gloves. All right. Well, our guests, Jake and Guy in our audience, I appreciate you guys coming through today. If you guys are watching on YouTube and would like to join us for a future show, feel free to visit our meetup page. You could check our event calendar and see what we have planned coming up. We try to update it as much as we can. Next month, we don't have anything planned as of yet, but we'll try to post on social media and whatnot if things come through. And we meet on the third Sunday of every month at 11, and we'll see you next month. So thanks everyone for coming.
And just real quick, I just want to say thank you guys for inviting me back, and for anyone who's interested in these types of things, to find more information, you can visit heroicheartsproject.org. That's where you'll find all the website and the information about this kind of stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll leave a link also in the description for the YouTube video of this. So thanks everybody.
Thanks a lot. Great show.